Welcome to the Cause Leadership Podcast, where we dive into the world of charity leadership. Join us as we explore the journeys of CEOs, executive directors, fundraisers, and other leaders in the sector. Hear about career journeys and gain insights on leadership, fundraising, and talent. Whether you're an emerging leader or a seasoned professional, tune in and subscribe to join us on this leadership journey. Welcome to the Cause Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hutchinson, and today I'm joined by Sandra Hawken, the CEO of Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation. Sandra is a values-based leader who's dedicated to inclusivity and empowerment. And since joining Holland Bloorview in 2015, Sandra, together with her team, has spearheaded remarkable growth, increasing the supporter base by over 1,000% and doubling annual fundraising. Her visionary leadership launched groundbreaking initiatives like the Capes for Kids program, raising over $7 million and inspiring a national movement for disability inclusion. With a track record of raising over $150 million for equity-focused charities, Sandra's impact resonates beyond her role at Holland Bloorview. Thanks for joining us as we learn more about Sandra's journey. As we jump into it, Sandra, I'd just love to hear a little bit about your career progression. I know you'd worked in advertising, so you've been in the for-profit side, but you've spent several years now serving as a leader in the charitable space. And just maybe give us a quick overview of what that was like for you.
Yeah, happy to. So I have a business degree, and I was the kind of business student that knew that I was unlikely to spend my entire career in corporate Canada. Pretty early on, I spent a disproportionate amount of my time as a student and as an early career professional volunteering, which was where my heart was. So I did spend the first, half decade of my career in the private sector, working in advertising and marketing consulting. And I was always pulled to the things that I was doing outside of work and really craving to do something that was more aligned with my values, or as I joke to my peers, use my skills for good instead of evil. So after my son was born and I returned from maternity leave, I made the purposeful decision to transition into the charitable sector so that I would feel proud of the way that I was spending my working hours and haven't regretted a day of it since. I spent the first 15 years of those years in the charitable sector working at feminist organizations focused on violence against women and gender equality. I had my first executive director or president role when I was 33 at the Royal LePage Shelter Foundation, and had the great privilege of working at some really exceptional national and local organizations until 8.5 years ago, when I made what felt like an even bigger change than the one from private sector to not-for-profit, from feminist philanthropy to healthcare philanthropy, and joined as CEO of the Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation in 2015.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. So let's jump into that a little bit. You said that was a difficult transition into the healthcare side. What made it more difficult?
Well, I think after spending 15 years working in women and gender-centric organizations, I made the decision that it was in some ways, I could live as a feminist leader among feminists, at mostly all-female boards and all-female staff. And I came into the healthcare sector wanting to take some of that and infuse it into my leadership in a different environment. And in lots of ways, healthcare philanthropy might be among the most traditional of a lot of the philanthropic organizations that exist, and for lots of great reasons. So I started off with an almost all-male board, all from banking, and that was a transition. But because I have a business degree and experience in the private sector, that was actually not the hardest part of the transition. I would say, and I'll tell a tale out of school, it's more typical that hospital foundation CEOs come from other hospital foundations or come from university foundations or quite senior in the career and private sector. So it was atypical that someone who came from community service leadership would make that leap. And as a result, the peers that I had in the city and in the province that held this role at other healthcare institutions had no idea who I was because I hadn't been part of their circle. So in my first couple of weeks as a CEO of a foundation, I was invited to a meeting with about a dozen other foundation CEOs in the GTA to talk about a bunch of things that related to the University of Toronto network. And the first person I met asked me whose assistant I was. And so that really set the tone early on in terms of me being a little bit of an odd duck. And
Sure.
I leaned into that and appreciated the fact that our hospital is different. Our team is different. And rather than be drowning in imposter syndrome, I used that as some fuel to, and was very transparent about that experience with my team for us to innovate. And so the transition was made and I haven't looked back.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm sad that was the story that you experienced, but I'm glad that you pushed through, and you've obviously become a leader in our space today. And I've certainly observed that, and would just love to get your perspective on what is it like to lead in the charitable space today? I mean, you're leading a sizable organization, but aside from that it's in healthcare and the kinds of dollars that you're dealing with are probably higher than some might in other places. It's still being a leader today in the charitable space is not an easy go. And so just curious, what are your thoughts and your feelings around leadership today?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I love how you framed it in particular, because there's lots written and talked about how complex leadership is today in a post-pandemic world, in our current geopolitical environment, in our current economy, in the current sort of war for talent, but also complexities of managing talent in the world that we are in. And it's never been harder or more nuanced to be a leader. And I would say that goes double for leaders in the charitable sector, because unlike our peers in the private sector, we often have additional pressures around doing all of those things while not spending any money on staffing or research and, cost of fundraising and all of those sorts of things. Having what I would argue is the most competitive of any sector that there is in terms of the number of charities for whom are looking to get share of heart, share of wallet from a finite population that are giving less. And, being able to attract great talent and keep great talent while our peers in the private sector are struggling with the same thing. So it's not for the faint of heart, but, I'm one of those nerds that sort of love a challenge. So I've never enjoyed my leadership journey more than I have when things are complex. And I think my team is similarly wired. And so we've had some of our best fundraising years and our best employee retention years and some of the hardest external facing years. The other kind of big thing that I would just say, which is not revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination, but the whole world had a bit of an awakening after the George Floyd murder, a long overdue awakening. So all of a sudden, companies, charities, everybody was thinking about DEI, or at Holland Bloorview, we call it IDEA, IDEAA, because we include accessibility as a hospital that focuses on disability. And it became a real focus. And I think that there was a lot of early effort, early spending, early conversation on that. Some of it performative, a lot of it performative, some of it effective, lots of great pledges signed and things happening. But I think because of that, there is a much higher and appropriate expectation of our employees, of our donors, of the community, that we're doing better. And I don't know that we're there yet. I don't know that as a sector we're there yet. I'm part of a group that is about 35 CEOs of hospital, university, and other foundations from across the country. And all but one of us look like me. So even though we may have made some progress in some organizations around more inclusive and diverse hiring, we're not there from a leadership perspective. And until that day happens, we can't say as a sector that we are leaders in that space, which wouldn't it be ideal if we were, given that we're value and mission-driven organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that same vein, Sandra, the state of the union, so to speak, or state of the sector reality is that it's going to take a while to shift that leadership perspective, right? And yet we have many colleagues, allies who are looking to move into leadership roles. And we want to open up our opportunities for folks who are looking to grow in their career and achieve senior level executive roles. What advice do you have for for those folks who are looking to make that shift, and especially when they're challenged by some of the realities of the market today?
Yeah, I think part of it is about finding an organization that's going to value you. Because one of the things that I am very cognizant of is that the work of this change isn't put on the shoulders of those who are experiencing the inequity. And so the advice I would actually rather give is to the leaders who are needing to build the pipeline of employees and then a culture of belonging and investment to ensure that they get there. We're very focused on that in our organization because we had our own issues in terms of the number of staff that we had that were representing seeking equity deserving groups. And we've made huge progress, but we've had to be really meaningful about it. And it's not about hiring quotas. It's about then really challenging your culture and your investment and then creating pipelines into leadership, which we continue to do.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've chatted about a little bit, and I'll move this into a bit of the talent and hiring perspective that you bring to the marketplace. You are, or at least I'm observing you doing this, you seem to be hiring younger talent that is perhaps not as experienced and giving them growth opportunities within your organization. And I know when you inherited the organization, it was challenged by some of the turnover issues that we hear about in the sector. But you've been able to curtail that. I'd just love to hear some of the hiring practices that you have been able to bring to Holland Bloorview.
Well, I'll start off by saying that I can't take credit for all of this.
Okay.
Everything in our organizational culture has been co-created by our entire team. And by including the voices of staff at every level and in every function, that's really helped us become a stronger, more equitable, more focused organization. So over the last 8.5 years that I've had the privilege of being at Holland Bloorview, we've grown significantly. So our staff size has tripled, our fundraising has quadrupled, our donor base is 1,000 times bigger than it was. And that was our plan. And we said at the very beginning that our plan was to grow, to make bigger impact for kids and youth with disabilities and the work that happens at Holland Bloorview, and that we committed to doing that by growing from within. And so there were different points along the way where we would hire senior talent in, but we always have had a much stronger experience by growing from within. So whenever there's an opportunity, we will hire early career staff that have less experience. And often what that will do is create a pipeline for some of that diversity we talked about. 1/3 of our staff have disabilities, which is really important to us. But BIPOC staff that represent other diverse frames of thought and background. Some of them have pursued classical fundraising education. Many of them haven't. And having that eclectic mix within our group has been really important to us. And so what we do is whenever there is an opportunity that arises, a maternity leave or a growth opportunity, we can add a net new headcount because a program is growing. We always start by looking from within. And we build our organization structure around the superpowers of the staff that we have. So as some of those staff who might come in with less experience, we uncover over their time with us that maybe they are a master of project management, or they thought they wanted to be an event planner, but really they are going to be the rock star leadership fundraiser that we never knew. And so we're always cultivating cross-team collaboration, and we have some very purposeful things that happen throughout the year to ensure that we're always plugged into that. And as a result, we have an incredibly high retention rate, almost no turnover, and a good culture of frequent investment in people's career, and doing that in a way that builds the pipeline. But it starts off with hiring though. So that's the most important. And for us, we've got really 3 big criteria when we hire. The first is around ensuring diversity, both diversity in the classical sense that we've been talking about, but also diversity in background and in experience, because we see ourselves as an innovative organization. We want to set best practices as opposed to just following them. So if we all think exactly the same, then that's not going to be possible. So that, we're creative and add folks to the interview pool that might look unexpected. If we don't see a diverse pool, we will go out and reach out to folks. I personally will reach out to folks and invite them to apply to positions to make sure that we have a diverse pool. But the other 2 things for us, one is values alignment. So that's different than fit, because fit is what kind of gets you into, a tricky zone of not having a diverse workforce, but it's values for us of innovation, of equity. And then the secret sauce of Holland Bloorview is the one thing that unites all of us is a shared, strong commitment to the mission. And so when that passion exists, then, it doesn't matter what the person's skill set is. We can invest in training and mentorship to get them there. So that's really important to us in hiring and giving opportunities to early career staff or people who are transitioning from other careers. And then we invest in our kind of progression from there.
Yeah, well, and which is amazing. And one of the things that I look at from the sector today is that how are we attracting some of that younger talent that perhaps has had a little bit of experience in the nonprofit space, either as a volunteer or early career, or maybe they're coming from outside the space entirely. And I'm just curious, what are some of the conversations you're having with folks that age about helping them transition into our space?
It's interesting because I would say even, 5 or 10 years ago, the conversations I had are a bit different than now. And it might be because I have a son who's in that age and space. So my lens has evolved a little bit in terms of my exposure. But I would say that, it used to be we could win, if you will, on passion, on impact, on feeling fulfilled by your job, on that high degree of engagement in the mission of your work. And any youth or any professional who was motivated by that value could see themselves in a career that did that. However, now that's possible in lots of industries. Companies understand that. So we've got lots of organizations that, have positioned themselves as socially responsible or have really robust programs to engage that way. My son works for an airline and is passionate about the democratization of air travel. And so he'll say, I followed in my mom's footsteps and she does a job that she's passionate about. So he's found a way to be passionate about something that by kind of clear definition isn't exactly the not-for-profit sector at all, although, airlines. But I would say that, so those conversations are shifting a little bit. So part of what we need to do, it's got to be more than just you'll feel good by working with us. You'll feel good by making impact. So our conversations also include, take a look at some of our other employees at Holland Bloorview's LinkedIn and see how often they've been promoted. We will be invested in your career, in your growth, in exploring what is going to make you excited and have you as a driver to that. And so that for me has been, there is sometimes a degree of conversation that happens among leaders in terms of Gen Z being, words like entitled are bandied around, or this like, I started and why am I not a VP in 3.5 weeks? And I kind of love that because what that means is that, these are some motivated folks with a strong confidence in their skills and ability. And so if we can harness that and feed their desire for growth, then that's really powerful. It's not always easy, and we have to always be on it and always be evolving. And it's sometimes tempting to be like, well, this is how I earned my stripes, but the world is different. Expectations are different. Options are plentiful. And so that's for me is how the conversation is shifting with early career staff.
That's great. And so just in preparing some of these younger leaders for more senior leadership roles. I mean, we're seeing what I call probably the largest leadership transition we've faced in decades, right? With the boomers leaving the marketplace, Gen X probably not representing the sufficient enough numbers to replace the leaders. And so I'm very hopeful that we are able to attract much younger leaders into our space so that we actually have the pipeline for future leadership as well. So when you look at leadership development or professional development within your context at Holland Bloorview, how is it that you're preparing somebody who may come in as a coordinator but wants to be a VP? How do we get them there?
Yeah. It's my greatest pleasure. There's nothing more fun than being a player in somebody's career blossoming. My executive team is made up of 4 VPs. 3 of those 4 all started at relatively junior roles in our organization, and over the last 8 years grew into a VP role. And so part of it is about cultivating that talent early on and creating opportunities and stretch assignments and career progressions in a really meaningful way, and building that into your plans and, being transparent with the board that I'm going to take this kind of young, dynamic dynamic staff team and give lots of opportunities. So that's part of it. Part of it too, though, is thinking about succession planning constantly, both in terms of succession planning for my role, succession planning for VP roles, but succession planning for every single role, so that we're thinking about that. It also makes any changes less stressful. I think that, we have some formal things that we've baked into our structures in terms of performance reviews and business planning. And we do anonymous employee engagement surveys, but we also do something every year that we call CEO one-on-ones. Well, I meet with every single staff in every single function. And I ask them questions about how we can do better as an organization. But half of the questions are about their career. I want to have audience with them. I want to be selfishly engaged in understanding what their career plans are, what they love, what they don't love. And these are conversations they will have also already had with their VP and their supervisor, but I want to hear it too as we're thinking about business planning, so that we can always, and it's fun to see how those conversations evolve. We also have a formal mentorship program where all of our early career staff are matched with a mentor in a different team to be able to support them. And then we have a monthly coaching session with all of our people managers and our managers in training. So our younger staff who are taking on summer students or are shadowing in management. And we will read leadership books. We will do peer sharing on leadership potential. So it's just a conscious, constant investment in that leadership journey. There are probably, our staff team is only 35 people strong, but I would say of those 35, there is at least 10 I fully intend to report to one day. Like, we have some real strong superstars, and they know that we see them that way. And so then they see themselves that way.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned coaching there. Is that internal coaching or external? Do you bring in external coaches as well, or?
So we're definitely looking at supplementing that. One of the things that we are very committed to doing is constantly evolving. And so what we have been doing historically is the coaching has been peer-based and internal, with some exceptions when we've had one of the new VPs, when she was first in a really senior role, had an external coach support her. So I have a VP coming in that will be covering for maternity leave, internally kind of moved into that role. And she's been offered an external coach. So we do some of that on an ad hoc basis, but we're hearing from our team that they might be excited to do that more formally and bringing in more external support. And so because we're ready for that, then we're going to evolve and give that a try, which I'm really excited about. The other thing that we always encourage our team to do, which I get the most benefit out of my own professional development, is build peer networks outside of our organization. So we facilitate peer networks within our organization, but whether it is finding others that have the same job as you at like organizations and setting something up formally, or whether it is getting a group of people that you trust from different industries that you have wine with once a quarter. I have a group that I do that with that we call Wine and Wine, where we can, in a safe space, really have those vulnerable leadership conversations. So the more that there is formal and informal opportunities to do that inside and outside the organization, the better it sets our leaders up for success, in addition to the formal investment we make in training.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Sandra, one of the things that can be a limiting factor for a lot of charities is compensation and the realities that plays in the charitable sector generally. How have you been able to address that?
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question. You're right. It's probably one of the hardest things that we struggle with. And if I look at, I mentioned we have a very low turnover, but if I look at the example of any staff that have left over the last 3 years, they've all gone to private sector, and because the compensation is dramatically more. So they haven't gone to another charity that they might like the culture better. They've left for the paycheck. One of the things that we did before it became something that everybody was asked to do by virtue of job boards being insistent that salaries are posted transparently is we've been transparent in our salary posting. We're also transparent with our staff team. So every year we do a thing where we share our pay bands with all of our staff, so they know all of the pay bands, and there's no kind of mystery about where that could be. And every year we take a 5 to 6 month period where we will look at every job posting that lists a salary that is publicly available, and we'll plug it all into a spreadsheet. Then we do and we share all of that data with everyone. So if they're doing it themselves and being like, oh, why is this organization paying more? We show them all the data. And if that data shows that we're off in any way, then we adjust it in real time. So it's something we commit to do every year transparently. Or do we pay as much as private sector? No. Are there outliers in our sector that can pay more than us because their fundraising base is higher than us? Yes. But we can in a really transparent partnership way say to our staff when they're like, we don't pay enough, we can show them the data. Now we also participate in, some of the externally structured salary benchmarking surveys, but because that's all anonymous, I find that my staff trusts that less. But where we're doing it ourselves, they see the organization X posted this on this date. They saw that because they get the email links and they can see the math and they can see how we've done it. So that's how we've addressed the salary piece. The other thing that we do is we have kind of open and honest ongoing conversations with our board about the levers to retention. And so, any leader will tell you if all of your staff say, I'm very satisfied with my compensation, maybe you're paying them too much. And so, but I never want my staff to say that they're dissatisfied with their compensation.
Right.
So, I want people to challenge me. I want people to ask for raises. I want to make sure that we're competitive and that people feel like they are rewarded and recognized. But what we also do is we work with our staff to look at all of the dimensions of compensation. And so we have some really creative non-monetary things, some that exist in other organizations and some that don't. And we continuously challenge ourselves on that front. And so I've had staff say, oh, I got a call for a great job at an organization that aligns with my values, that has a great culture, and the salary was more, but they can't give me these 6 things that Holland Bloorview does, so I'm staying. So it's a full picture, I think, but you can't just say, well, we're a charity, so we're not going to pay you as much because we can't. It's not going to fly anymore.
Yeah, it's not a sufficient answer. What are some of the things that your team does ask for? That one of those, those 5 or 6 items that would set you apart?
So the number one thing my team would say is that we've made a firm commitment to our team to be a permanent, flexible, hybrid workforce. So we do not have designated days that people must be in our office. We give people flexibility about where they work and when they work and how they work. And that is consistent across our team, with the exception of our receptionist. And he happens to choose to want to work on site. So that was a great alignment. But we have, one of our staff team during the pandemic moved to Newfoundland, and she continues to effectively be a member of our team, has received 2 promotions since moving to Newfoundland, and feels as though she's part of our team. What we do to make sure that we still have team cohesion is there are some compulsory days throughout the year where we all get together for learning and team building. But that high degree of flexibility creates a quality of life and an effectiveness in work that is really important to our staff team. And more so, it's really accessible. So a lot of employers who, were in the pandemic saw their staff be highly effective working from home and now have said, nope, that's not possible. We can't do good work unless we're all in the same space. And for some organizations, that might be true. It's not true of our organization. But who they're leaving out are staff who have disabilities, who find challenges in transportation, who might have neurodiversity, who need different kinds of accommodation in the workplace, who might need different hours of work to accommodate their disability. I've been able to attract some outstanding talent because we are a fully accessible workplace by virtue of being hybrid. So that I've talked too long about it, but that's because it's the thing my staff say most of all, please never change that. Please never change that. To ensure that they knew that I was never going to change that, we gave up some of our office space. So on purpose, I gave up my office. We now have only hoteling for everybody, including me. And even if I wanted all of the staff in at once, I couldn't. We don't have enough desks. And so there's a visual kind of guarantee and insurance that we're not going to change our mind and make everybody move and come in. So I think that was number one. But then we do a whole bunch of other things, like people get their birthdays off. We have, some little subtle things that don't cost a lot of money. We have a system of values awards. Our current strategic plan is called Daring Together, our 5-year plan. And so we call them Daring Together awards, and they're peer nominated awards. And there's different kind of financial incentives if you win awards. And then if you get 3, you get an extra day off. And so there's long weekends or extra long weekends. We have a really progressive approach to wellness, mental wellness days, bereavement policies that embrace multi definitions of family and faith. So it's not you get 2 days if it's your dad and 3 days if it's your son. It's you get as much as you need. And so we have increased our benefits, particularly around mental wellness. And we have ensured that our team are really the ones whose voices speak to what training they get, how they spend their time. And those are the things that help people feel like they have found community in our workspace.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even just the transparency that you've talked about, which builds trust. You're obviously building a culture that is very deep and adaptable to the whole team and accessible to the whole team, which is really amazing.
I mean, I would say that we're a listening organization.
Yeah.
My leadership is directly correlated to the strength of my team. So I learned from them, and it's not about me. We all have a shared investment in ensuring that our culture is strong and that our results are strong and that we're doing what we need to help kids and families.
Yeah. Well, it all starts with leadership. And so obviously you're bringing that to the table. So I appreciate that, Sandra. The amazing thing about what you do is that you get to work at Holland Bloorview. So tell us a little bit more about Holland Bloorview, the things that you're doing. I know you just came through Capes for Kids season, which is kind of a fun time of the year for you guys, I'm sure. Yeah, tell us more about the foundation and how it supports the hospital and all that sort of stuff. We'd love to hear that.
One of the things that the people in my life know is that I'm the person who can't wait for Monday morning. 8.5 years in, and I still feel like I've won the lottery in terms of where I get to work and who I get to work with. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So Holland Bloorview, for those who have never heard of the organization, some people call us the very best hospital that no one has heard of, although that's
right,
changing.
Yeah.
We are the largest institution in Canada focused on pediatric disability, both healthcare, but also academic leadership. And our research institute has the highest concentration of childhood disability research anywhere in the world. And part of why we can make some of those claims is because of donors and the bridge that we've built to the community. At Holland Bloorview, there's a lot of what we do that is traditional healthcare philanthropy in terms of funding research and equipment and capital. But a bigger part of what we do actually isn't traditional healthcare philanthropy because hospital at Holland Bloorview is not traditional. So we fund our summer camp, our music program, our robotics program, direct financial support for families who can't make ends meet, job employment programs for youth. And so in some ways, we're like a community agency, an advocacy organization, and a hospital and a research institute all wrapped up into one. And a big part of what we purposefully do is invite our donors and the community into not just supporting philanthropically our organization, but supporting our mission to increase disability inclusion and reduce disability stigma. So you referenced Capes for Kids. That's one of our biggest public-facing community fundraising initiatives where we raise about $1 million, $1.5 million each year, where a week everybody wears superhero capes. And the reason for that was we wanted something that would be very visible and conversation initiating and be a high ROI peer-to-peer event. So it's been incredibly helpful in terms of building our donor base and our engagement across corporate, schools, and the community at large. But what's great about it is when you're out in a cape for that week, it is impossible not to have conversations about it because people will look at you at first with a funny look, wondering about your fashion sense. And then that often leads to great conversations about what it is Holland Bloorview does. And that's important to us. A lot of our marketing or our public facing communications is really about anti-stigma and our corporate fundraising. All of our corporate donors are signatories to a disability inclusion pledge that we launched several years ago. We have 150 major Canadian brands that have pledged to be more inclusive employers, include more disability in their imagery. They participate in learning sessions and have access to our research. And so we think about that quite differently. We have recently, less than a year ago, opened a research institute, major growth. We acquired Canada's first fully accessible, child-friendly MRI, built an enormous addition to our building, and acquired a number of new research talent to be able to have that global leadership in research for pediatric disability, which is essential for the future of the kids and youth that we care about. That was 100% donor funded, and not a penny came from government. And so we're really proud of that. And our team is really excited. We will be launching publicly in about a year or so the largest campaign in the history of our country to support pediatric disability. And so we continue to see a swell of community interest and support in the work that we do and the kids that we support, not just here in Toronto, which is where Holland Bloorview is based, where we see about 8,000 kids a year as inpatients and outpatients through our research institute, but also the impact that we make beyond our walls. So in training clinicians that might be the first of their kind in their country of origin. An example is, to kind of give you a sense of what that means, there is one of the first developmental pediatricians in Bangladesh who trained at Holland Bloorview, now impacts 3 million children a year through both his clinic, but also his spin-off company, where he's taken the brain-computer interface technology that we pioneered at Holland Bloorview and made it available to kids in Bangladesh. And so there is a big focus in terms of us ensuring, whether it's across Canada or across the globe, that we take the best practices of Holland Bloorview and ensure that more kids have access. It's not about building 100 more Holland Bloorviews or some kind of dominance in that sense, but it's really making the technology that we develop accessible, training and exporting our programs. And none of that would be possible without the community. So it's a really great privilege. My team and I take, with a great deal of reverence that we get to be part of that journey and use those skills that I acquired early in my career for good for some of the coolest, most interesting, funniest kids I've ever met.
I bet. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Sandra, we're going to have to revisit this campaign that you've talked about maybe in a future conversation. So I'd love to do that. But I know we're out of time here, but I really just want to thank you for being the leader that you are in our sector today, and for many of the things that we've already talked about, but certainly the way you've built culture, the way you have implemented hiring and giving opportunity where opportunity is recognized and people are grown within your organization, and just the critical impact that you and, of course, your donors and many volunteers, I'm sure, that make Holland Bloorview what it is today. But certainly high praise to your team and the collaborative way in which you guys are contributing to kids, but also to our sector in general. So really appreciate you being our guest today, being our inaugural guest, as we talked about. And just thank you so much for your participation with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for what you're doing to amplify the conversation around cause leadership and what could be possible in our sector as we have some of these hard conversations. So I really appreciate your leadership, Dave.
Well, thank you, Sandra. Appreciate that.